Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. This week's video, I want to start off by saying thank you, sincerely from the bottom of my heart. The No I'm Not a Human video is doing better than I could have ever imagined. It's already like the second most viewed video I've ever put out, and by far the most successful within the first week that I've ever put out, and I really appreciate that. Even if you're someone who just subscribed or someone who's been around and following me doing this weekly for over a year now, which is crazy to say, I just really appreciate all of you for taking the time to listen to me talk. And I'm glad that you guys can get something out of me, which is, maybe some sort of entertainment or fun or enjoyment or whatever it is. I'm just glad that I can give that to you guys, and I'm very thankful for you guys allowing me to do this and allowing this to turn into eventually, hopefully, more than just a side fun gig, you know what I mean? But sincerely, thank you. And as silly as it's going to sound, genuinely doing that video took a lot out of me. That video was very depressing to research, and the video game itself was very depressing, and I literally, for the 5 days straight that I was just researching from when the game came out to when I finally recorded and edited, I would literally just go to my classes, do my homework, and then play the game and write it down. So it did take a little bit out of me, which is why this week's video is going to be a little more relaxed, a little more chill, and going sort of more back to my roots once again, which is Life is Strange. And this week we're going to be doing one of my character deep dives into a character that I surprisingly haven't covered yet. I was really shocked to figure out that I haven't covered this character yet, and that would be Rachel Amber. Rachel Amber, while not a playable character in the series, is one of the most important characters in Life is Strange and Life is Strange Before the Storm. She's the central mystery. She is the Laura Palmer, the sort of mystery aspect to the original game. And for those of you unaware, Laura Palmer is a character from Twin Peaks, and Life is Strange takes a lot of inspiration from Twin Peaks, which is something I've discussed in previous videos. So this is going to be a typical deep dive video where first we go over their early life, where we meet them in the game, then we look at their individual relationships, and then we'll look at some trivia / some theories related to the character. So without further ado, let's get into it. Rachel Dawn Amber was born on July 22nd, 1994. She was born in Long Beach, California to James and Sarah. Now, Sarah is her biological mom who struggled with drug issues. Sarah is very similar to Rachel in terms of her being very popular in high school, that everybody liked her, but she always has that sort of need for more, that craving of something. And for Sarah, this manifested in her abuse of drugs. When we first hear James discuss his and Sarah's relationship, it's very prototypical romance. He was the jock and she was the cool girl, and they met and they just hit it off. James would end up leaving Sarah because of these drug issues. He was afraid of how they would have hurt Rachel. And another quick parallel between Rachel and her mother is that James specifically says he was blinded by love when they first met, and that's how he sort of overlooked her addiction and her other issues. The interesting thing is you could say the same about Chloe being so blinded by love from Rachel that she overlooks Rachel's drug problem, as well as her overall mental issues that she faces, which ultimately leads her to betraying Chloe and going and doing a lot of stuff. After leaving Sarah, James and Rachel and his new wife moved to Arcadia Bay, which is where Rachel spends most of her life. There's very little details on specific events from Rachel's life before we see her in the games. The nice thing about covering these playable characters like Chloe and Max is that we get a lot of very anecdotal stories and little details about things that they did or saw where they previously lived and stuff that happened off screen. For example, Max with her friends at the Fremont Troll. The one story that we have from Rachel, which I think is very important, is her story about climbing Mount Hood with her father. She mentions that she broke her arm, so her father carried her all the way down. And this is sort of where we learn And this is sort of one of the reasons why Rachel has a very strong connection with her father, which is why his betrayal, when she figures it out, if she figures it out, is ultimately so heartbreaking for her. Somewhere between Life is Strange and Life is Strange Before the Storm, Blackwell Academy introduced a specialized 2-year extended senior program, which would explain why Rachel is still a student at Blackwell by the time of 2013. Otherwise, she would have graduated in the spring of 2012. Now, this is something that we have discussed briefly, just that Blackwell Academy and their school system makes no sense. At first, we hear that they're like a special senior program, but then we hear about other characters who are far younger, and then we hear about other characters who have been there for a while, and then eventually they sort of, I might be mistaken, but as far as I know, they kind of retconned in through like some small documents and things like that, that they have multiple grade levels and there's different reasons that you can be going to Blackwell Academy and different entry levels, I guess you could say. But for example, Max is there for their senior program. Rachel Amber is canonically bisexual. This is referenced not only in the relationships that she has, but also during Two Truths and a Lie in episode 1 of Before the Storm. She mentions she's ambidextrous, but a lot of people have taken this to mean that it's a euphemism for her being bisexual. Something interesting about Rachel is her connection to spirituality. Whether it's astrology or the jewelry that she has, which trust me, that's a whole theory that we'll get into, she seems to have some sort of connection with the spiritual world or with the otherworldly. Specifically, when it comes to her astrology, she mentions that she is a Leo. I'm not an expert on this, but according to the research I've done, being born in California on July 22nd, 1994 would make her 29 degrees Cancer unless she was born at 7 p.m. or later. Now, for those of you who don't know about astrology, the time of day that you are born is also very important to deciding what you are, and also the smaller signs or things such as what your moon is, what's this rising, what's this, the sort of different aspects of your astrological chart really depend on time and place. So the fact that Rachel says very adamantly that she is a Leo shows us that she has taken a lot of time and done a lot of research into this thing, and that she knows what she's talking about. We can also, weird little detail, we can now say for sure that Rachel was born at 7 p.m. or later. The other interesting thing about Rachel is that she has an Enneagram test result sort of on her room. She has a type 4 personality, the individualist. This is a very creative and unique and distinctive person. Type 4 personalities long to connect with others. However, they don't feel like they really can because they are unusual, and that few people are truly able to see them, which is, clear as day Rachel, being that Chloe, at least for a time, is the one person who fully understands her. Overall, Rachel is a very interesting character. I think that's safe to say. One of the things we can really take away about her is that she longs to not only be understood, but also understand herself, which is why I think she buries herself in these personality tests as well as astrology. It's something that people often go to try and understand themselves and make sense of the world. Next, we're going to get into Rachel's relationships. First, starting with her family, she has James Amber and Rose Amber. Rose is her adoptive mother, and I think it's safe to say that the two have a very strong relationship, especially because the first part of Before the Storm, Rachel believes that her father is cheating on her mother and is very, very adamant to prove it, no matter what, to try and find the truth by following him around to the park and other things. Back to James, once again, she has a strong relationship with her father. She trusts him very much, which is why this whole idea of him cheating is such a blasphemous thing in her mind that she can't seem to wrap her head around. So you can see this relationship with her father is interesting because it's why you get the option to hide everything from Rachel, hide the truth from her, because it would completely shatter her worldview. Now, if we want to talk what's canon, what's not, in my personal opinion, I think Chloe telling the truth is the canon ending, because this would fuel Rachel's need to get away from Arcadia Bay. Not that she wouldn't want to anyway, I just think that the shattering of what her normal world, her safe environment is, would be enough to really push her. Next is Sarah Gearhart, who is Rachel's biological mother. This is the last of her family. She does not have any siblings. Sarah had a drug problem, which is why James ultimately left her. However, she did overcome it and tried to see her daughter again, but James wouldn't allow it. He seemingly was unable to forgive her for the way she acted when she was struggling. Now, the thing with Sarah is she's, once again, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, meant to be a parallel to Rachel in a way, because they act very similarly, and they both have that same sort of fire in them, I think. Next, we're going to get into a list of her friends. Evan Harris claims to be a very good friend of Rachel, even saying that they were like siblings to an extent. He said he didn't like her Vortex Club friends at all, and she didn't seem to care that he did dislike them. He would often take photos of Rachel. He's one of the first people in Life is Strange that we can speak to about Rachel, someone who actually knew her. And it shows you right away that there's more to her than just the pretty girl who vanished, the party girl, the whatever you want to call her. Justin and Trevor, who are the sort of skater bros, also mention hanging out with Rachel. We also know that they were friends with Chloe as well, so I could absolutely see all of them hanging out together at some point in time. Here's the trouble with trying to list all of Rachel's friends. The fact is, she was seemingly friends with everybody. Everybody knew her a little bit, but nobody knew who she really was at her core. And this is very similar to Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, who, like I said, it will come back, I promise. So, honestly, when it comes to her list of friends, you can say just about anybody. Even somebody like Victoria Chase or Nathan Prescott, who we're going to get into in the enemies section, could be considered friends to an extent because she spent time with them and, at least publicly, had a decent relationship with them. Now we're going to get into Rachel's romantic relationships. Now, the interesting thing is that in Life is Strange 1, it's technically just implied that Chloe and Rachel had a romantic relationship. However, in Before the Storm, you can actually choose. Were they just very close friends, or were they romantic? In my personal opinion, if we want to go with what's canon, I would have to say that they are in a romantic relationship. The betrayal that Chloe mentions feeling when she finds out that she was sleeping with Frank, or other things that she could possibly have been sleeping with Nathan or posing with him or whatever you want to call it, there's a clear amount of betrayal that's felt by Chloe. And while Chloe is a possessive person, this is the same person who gets mad at Max for taking a phone call from her depressed friend instead of just walking out the door with her right away. I think that there's another level to this than just Chloe being a little insecure. When Chloe finds Rachel's body in the first game, she breaks down in tears and says directly to Max that she loved her so much. And that's, once again, I feel like it's beyond a friend thing, even though it's just implied at this point. Like, I have great friends. I have friends that I would say I genuinely love. But I think it's the way that her affection is presented and the way that she presents it that sort of makes me believe it's romantic. And then obviously the previous game fully leans towards that. I've seen some debate of, does Rachel actually care about Chloe? And why people say that is because they feel that Chloe was used by Rachel, whether it was to get out of Arcadia Bay or because of Rachel not being loyal to her in several ways, and we'll get into that. It's an interesting idea, and while I think that she did love her, I think what it is that Rachel is someone who needs more. She's never going to be satisfied with just one person or one place. Even if they had escaped Arcadia Bay, I don't think Rachel would have been satisfied with where they ended up. And that's the thing about Chloe, is she's also someone who's always looking for something new. It's why I've said in the past that I don't think Max and Chloe romantically would have worked out. But she would have been able to keep up to an extent, but it's clear that at the very least, really early on, before her, Chloe was ready to just say, okay, this is the one for me. And I feel like especially in Before the Storm, that relationship is meant to represent something that I think a lot of us go through when we find somebody, our first love, the person that we think, oh my God, this is it, this is who I'm gonna be with, when you're like a teenager in high school, and then it becomes sort of toxic and goes wrong. And not that either side is innocent or horribly evil. They are both making mistakes. I'm sure Chloe has similar tendencies, and we've discussed that in a previous video about how her personality and how she can be a flawed person. Rachel can be too, but I think that's more so what it's meant to be. It's not that they didn't genuinely love each other or that Rachel used Chloe. It's just that the types of people they were and the stages in their lives that they were at, it was just a fire waiting to happen. You know what I mean? And that kind of brings us to a very interesting subject that is sort of forgotten, I feel like. The fact that Rachel had a relationship with Frank, and not just a friendship, a physical, intimate relationship with Frank Bowers, who, by the time of Life is Strange 1, is 31 years old. He's 28 in Before the Storm. The age that Rachel would be in Before the Storm is 16 years old. So that's kind of awkward. No, but in all seriousness, the whole plot line, even before the Storm came into the mix and things like that, the whole idea of Rachel and Frank having a relationship is weird. And I think that's intentional. They needed somebody who we knew and that we disliked as a character to have a very close relationship with Rachel. It couldn't really have been Nathan, and I don't think they would have wanted to make it another woman because they wanted to kind of up that betrayal. I think that a lot of people, especially if you're in a queer relationship, can feel an extra level of insecurity when it comes to your ex or somebody, your ex-partner or whatever, dating somebody who is of a different gender. There's a certain level of insecurity that comes with that, and I think that was fully intentional by the writers as to why they made it Frank. But it's still pretty freaking weird. Now, by the time of Life is Strange 1, Rachel would have been about 19 years old. So for the sake of Frank, let's say that their relationship started, I don't know, about a year before that when Rachel was about 18. Still weird. Beyond all of that, the fascinating thing about it, that shows another shade of Rachel, that shows that we will never actually have the full picture of who she was, is that she also told Frank that she would leave Arcadia Bay with him. So it wasn't exclusive to Chloe. The other thing is that it appears that her relationship with Frank had ended sometime before she had disappeared, because she has a letter to him basically saying that she's done being with him because he became violent at one point while he was on drugs. Now, the question is, with this relationship, from Rachel's perspective, what was the thing that she was gaining here? What was she getting out of dating a 30-year-old? Nathan Prescott, who is not exactly a reliable source, in my opinion, thinks that it was purely for drugs. He claims that she was purely sleeping with him for free drugs or discounted drugs, which would make a lot of sense. I think Rachel is the type to sort of be able to play with people's emotions and manipulate them. We see that clear as day in Before the Storm, but Chloe sort of has these rose-tinted glasses on because they're together. They're doing it together. They're manipulating the evil Victoria to get her out of the play, and so it's good, it's okay. But Chloe never considers that that same thing could be used on her or a friend of hers. Because let's not forget, Chloe and Frank were kind of friends. And I would also like to believe that this is the only reason for their relationship, other than the fact that Rachel seems to be the kind of person who just craves attention. She always wants new attention, a new chase, that kind of thing. So I think it could be a mixture of things, that there was a financial and, drug-related benefit to dating this guy. And also, hey, I have someone who's obsessed with me. I now have two people who are obsessed with me. But the big thing is, the betrayal to Chloe is what I want to hit on here. Because just insane. Because that also means Frank had to look Chloe in the eye every time that she was buying drugs for that year or that few months or whatever it was, knowing that, and just had to keep it to himself. Now, obviously, he doesn't love Chloe. He's not like a good friend, but they still know each other. It's just, it's all very messy. But I believe the other thematic reason for this is because, once again, the connection to Twin Peaks. Laura Palmer has a fascinating sort of backstory. She's dating this guy, but then she's also working at the Black Lodge, and she's also maybe seeing this person. Like, you don't get the full picture of who she is. And it's very clearly meant to be that Rachel is a parallel to Laura Palmer. Side tangent. The other thing that I think proves to me that no matter what, Chloe is in love with Rachel in the first game and beyond, which is another reason why I don't think her and Max work as a full relationship, but that's just me. I've gotten into hot water over that before. I don't want to stoke that flame again, but is that Chloe says that she basically would have rathered this have just stayed secret. She would have rather have just not known about it and continued to see Rachel as this idealized person that she is. Basically saying that she blended in like a chameleon, clearly more than I knew or wanted to know. And that to me, once again, hits home. Chloe loves Rachel more than you can imagine. In the same way that I think many of us have loved our first relationship, no matter how flawed they were as a person and how flawed we were. Which is why, once again, I think that she's still so hung up on her. And that I think even without Before the Storm, you can safely say that they were in a romantic relationship. Finally, we have allegedly kinda Mark Jefferson. Now, obviously there's rumors that you can hear about Rachel and Mark Jefferson sleeping with each other. And in a letter, Rachel mentions that she met someone who changed her life and things like that. We can very safely assume that this is Mark Jefferson. Now, what's interesting is the developers confirmed that Rachel was in love with Jefferson, and that the letter to Chloe in their hideout actually referred to him. The other thing is, Jefferson knew about not just her relationship with Chloe, but also her relationship with Frank, meaning that Rachel trusted him enough to tell him about both of them. The way that Mark Jefferson sort of describes Rachel is less as a romantic partner and more of just someone that he has a little bit of affection for. Talks about taking photos of her and that they did have a real connection to an extent. The other thing about Jefferson that I think is going to be important to this question of were they actually romantic together is the way that he reacts to Victoria trying to come onto him. He shoots her down very, very quickly. Even though, as far as he knows, he's alone and no one else sees him. He could take advantage of this opportunity, but he doesn't. I think that what that means is that for Jefferson, the sort of pleasure that he gets out of taking the photos of people and drugging them and things like that is not inherently a sexual thing. While he gets an enjoyment out of it, I don't think it's one of those things like a serial killer who does it to get off. He does this because he has a demented love of art and a demented view of how he wants to use these people and these women as sort of objects to explore art. So what it seems to me is that Rachel was finally, I guess, outmatched in terms of her ability to manipulate and sort of blend in. She fully trusted Jefferson and felt that she could be herself around him and that they had a real connection. For Jefferson, he saw this as the ideal muse, the ideal person who would let him take as many photos of her as he wanted because she was in love with him and he knew it. The other thing is he's not too broken up about her death. He's more upset that Nathan ruined what was his perfect subject because he wanted to be like him. So all in all, I think to me, that's exactly what it was to Mark Jefferson. And to Rachel, it could have been a lot more. Finally, let's talk enemies. In Before the Storm, we have Damon Merrick, who is hired by Rachel's father in order to kill her mother. I know, Before the Storm has like some big family melodrama and stuff like that. It gets kind of wild. However, the first time they meet is in the junkyard, and Rachel, while at first seems scared of him, ultimately very quickly stands up to him, which once again shows her fiery nature, I guess you could say. Next is Drew Noer. Rachel is surprisingly sympathetic towards Nathan, which is very interesting because of what we know happens to her. She appreciates that Chloe stood up for him against Drew, and specifically mentions that to her. The only time we ever really see Rachel feel bad for Drew is if Nathan and him get into a physical fight that ends with Drew being hurt. She does show some sympathy towards him. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, okay, he was a jerk, but he didn't deserve that kind of feeling. Then we've got Victoria Chase, who, despite the fact that they act like friends and that people see them in sort of the same social circles, they were not in fact friends. Victoria specifically really disliked Rachel because she felt that she was above her in the social chain. Victoria is always looking for the upper hand on Rachel, whether it's calling her a slut on the drama lab board or trying to see if Rachel is on drugs, because in her thinking, her being with Chloe means that she's now much more involved in drug. It's clear that this sort of hatred between the two is less of a moral thing like it is with Drew, where, you know, she doesn't like him because he's a bully, and more of a Victoria and her bickering because of, you know, high school drama, the social ladder. Then we've got Nathan Prescott, which is fascinating, because I initially had him in Friend, because in Before the Storm, she feels bad for him and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, pities him to an extent because of how he's bullied. And then later on, it seems like they hung out together at Vortex Club events when we get to Nathan/Victoria and all of that in Life is Strange 1. However, I ultimately wanted to put him in this later category because, after all, he's responsible for her death. In an attempt to sort of impress Jefferson, maybe he knew that Rachel was his sort of prized subject, whatever you want to call it, he tried to imitate him by drugging her and taking photos of her. However, in the end, he used too much, and it led directly to her death. Nathan seems to know a lot about the relationship that Frank and Rachel have. This is because, as I said earlier, he theorizes that she was sleeping with him for drugs. It's possible that Jefferson maybe absent-mindedly said some information related to it because obviously he was mentoring Nathan, or maybe they were all three in the sort of dark room, photo room at the same time and had a light chat, I guess you could say. Overall, the relationship is kind of a mystery because, I don't know, it's very up in the air about what they could have been because of the amount of information he knew, but also his proximity to Mark Jefferson and his actions that ultimately led to her death. It's very, very up in the air, and I think it's something we'll never truly know. Same with her relationship with Mark Jefferson, simply because he's an unreliable narrator, and so is Jefferson. Finally, we're going to get into some theories about Rachel. First things first is the whole spirit animal debate. Before we get into the main theory, which is that the doe that we see throughout Life is Strange 1 is meant to be Rachel, let's talk about the feather that she has on her earring. It's a blue jay feather. Blue jays are very adaptable, they fit into groups. It fits Rachel's personality very, very well. The other thing is it would fall in line with the fact that a lot of characters have some sort of thing on them that directly connects to their spirit animal. Whether it's Max wearing the doe shirt or Chloe having the blue butterfly tattoo, it seems to be connected. The only blue jay that we see in the game is in Chloe's house. It's the one that's constantly dying in different places. Either it flies into the window or you let it inside and then it dies here and this and that. And it's sort of representative of how Rachel, no matter what, was going to end up going down this darker path because she was never going to be satisfied and because of her constant need for more and more. However, the biggest theory is that she is the doe. We see the doe at several very important points throughout the game. Most frequently would be in the junkyard, which is where Rachel's body is. In the director's commentary, they say specifically that the that the doe is directly connected to Rachel, is sort of trying to guide Max to try and solve the mystery. Now, I think that this doesn't necessarily confirm that it's her spirit animal. It could be that Rachel is appearing to Max as Max's spirit animal in order to try and connect with her more. If Max saw a regular blue jay or some other animal that she didn't really have a direct connection to, she might not have taken it as seriously or been as intrigued by it. However, a doe, something that she clearly has a connection with because of her wardrobe and other sort of character aspects, I think that's sort of an intentional thing by Rachel from the spirit world to reach out. The next theory directly revolves around Rachel's blue bracelet. And it's very interesting. For you Twin Peaks fans, it's finally here. The Twin Peaks related theory I've been hinting at the whole time is finally here. You can relax now. This bracelet is mentioned and shown many, many times throughout both Life is Strange Before the Storm and Life is Strange. One of the big theories is that this is a gift from Rachel's mother, Sarah, and that it's sort of a Native American related item, that it is a magic talisman that is supposed to protect Rachel. This is a direct reference to Laura Palmer's ring from Twin Peaks. More specifically, the ring that protects her in the movie Fire Walk With Me. We have some evidence to back up the fact that she has had this since her birth. She says that it was something that she's worn since she was a little girl in California. And she says, "I've literally never taken it off. My dad told me that I wore it from the hospital home, if you can believe that." In Steph's D&D game, we specifically mentioned the Bracer of Fire immunity, which could very clearly be connected. Other pieces of information that show that this bracelet could have been protecting Rachel until she took it off is that when Frank brandishes it in the junkyard, Max attempts to fire the gun, if you choose to go that route, and it doesn't go off. However, when he doesn't have the bracelet in episode 4, you can fire at him and kill Frank in the sequence where you try to confront him. The other thing that gives this a lot more credence than I think your average Life is Strange fan would think is that we've discussed in previous deep dives and theories and things like that, that there was meant to be a much larger story here in Life is Strange. And that a big aspect of it was going to be spirituality, and specifically Native American spirituality. It was meant to be a much larger part of the story. And if you go all the way back, which I'm talking all the way back to my first ever video, really, my Life is Strange deep dive, you'll see that I talk about that theory quite thoroughly. So all that to say, I think it's plausible, especially when you consider the early ideas revolving around Native American spiritualism. Our next and final theory is one of the biggest related to Rachel, and it's, does she have powers? Some people point to how at the end of episode 1 in Life is Strange Before the Storm, when she knocks over the trash can with the fire and then screams, it's sort of the wind gusts with it and spreads it. Some people say that the mixture of Rachel's scream and the Raven's voice are sort of in play here, and that it represents that she has some sort of power related to fire. The other thing that would sort of connect her to the fire is the fact that it dies down once she is stabbed. Basically saying that Rachel's power isn't necessarily fire, but it's related to the environment, and that the environment will reflect the way that she's feeling. And in this case, it's anger, it's directness. She will tear everything apart to find out the truth about her father cheating, which in the end leads to finding out about her biological mother. This would play into the idea that the storm from the first game is actually meant to be Rachel's wrath rather than a product of chaos theory. The reason I say that is because in the first game, Chloe specifically says this storm could be Rachel's revenge. Our revenge. Which, once again, the way that she talks about her, even after learning everything, shows me that Chloe is so in love with her. Anyway, that's besides the point. This would, once again, connect Rachel to the environment and to what she's feeling. And connect her to Chloe, once again. That this sort of wanting to purge Arcadia Bay and wipe it out and start new after being betrayed and sort of causing all this harm, it would perfectly line up with her character. The other thing is that Rachel plays the character Prospera. Who created a tempest, a violent storm as a form of revenge? I mean, close the book right there. Done. I don't even need to do it. Well, I know I said I was going to do a shorter video to sort of ease myself back into things, but I'm looking at my recording and it looks like it's going to be another long one. But what do you expect from Rachel Amber? Always has to make a sort of entrance and exit, I guess you could say. So thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you all for the recent support on the channel. I once again really appreciate it, and each and every one of you for taking the time to watch this and like or comment or whatever. I've said this before, but never in a million years did I think I would be able to do this and confidently say, yeah, I do YouTube for fun, and I have a few thousand subscribers, and people like my videos. I'm just incredibly thankful. Seriously, I'm at a loss for words, and I just truly appreciate all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a good morning or evening or, you know, whatever.